Sometimes the best way or the only way to describe something is by saying what it's not. It's a way that we men describe the girl who's just captured our heart. We tell everyone who'll listen to us that she is not like any other girl that I have ever met. She's not too talkative, but at the same time she is not too shy. She's not overly forward, but she's definitely not backward. She's not arrogant and up herself, but she's no walkover. She's not too opinionated, but she's definitely not too scared to tell me what she thinks. She's not vain. She's not overly concerned about her looks. She is not like any other girl that I have ever met. Sometimes it's the best way, the only way to describe the person that you've met, fallen in love with. It's how, again, we describe holidays. We describe our holidays by talking about the things we don't have to do in our holidays, the things omitted from holidays and day off. You describe your day off by saying, I don't have to go to school, I don't have to go to college tomorrow, I don't have to get up early, I don't have to go to bed at the same time as normal, don't have to get into that old uniform. I get to go a whole day, a whole summer without classes, without tests, without homework. For those of you who work, get up every day and go out to work, you describe a holiday as a day when you don't have an early start, you don't have to go through that commute to the shop, to the workplace, to your office. You've no difficult boss or demanding clients or customers to face. You've no reports, no deadlines, no pressure, no paperwork, no work. That's the joy of holidays and how we describe the joy of holidays, by describing all the things that we don't have to do, we don't have to face, the things that are omitted on those days. And that's how John describes heaven and the joy of heaven for us in Revelation. You see, there are no words, there are no human words to adequately describe the wonder and the joy and the pleasure and the peace and the perfection of what we will see and experience and enjoy in heaven. The otherworldly wonder, it's too far above even our wildest imaginations. There are no words to describe. It's something human words can't describe. The only way that John can describe the wonder of heaven, its perfection, is by telling us what it's not. The things that won't be there. The things that you won't have to face ever again. The things that make earth so difficult and so painful and so hard that we won't have to face in heaven. He describes heaven by telling us and describing the things that are omitted from heaven. Just as you describe your girlfriend, your boyfriend by saying what they're not, just as you describe your delight at a day off by talking about what you don't have to experience, the things that are omitted from that day, so too John describes heaven and his delight at heaven by saying what it's not. This morning, as you see in your camp book or theme, the title for our talk is The Omissions from heaven, as John describes them for us in this chapter, Revelation 21. The first thing that he says that is omitted from heaven, there'll be no sin. There'll be no sin. Look at verse 27. Describing that holy city coming down out of heaven, John says, nothing unclean will ever enter it. Nothing unclean will ever enter it. Nothing impure, nothing improper, nothing unclean. No sin will ever enter heaven. Sin, that thing that ruined God's perfect world, that is solely responsible for everything that's wrong in the world, the cause of all that's broken and damaged in the world. It's responsible for the death, for the disease, for the unhappiness, everything that's wrong in the world. John says it won't be in heaven. The sin that makes this world such a horrible place. Excuse me. The sin that makes this world such a horrible place, the selfishness, the rivalry, the murder, the abortion, the perversion, the rape, the affairs that all go on in the world, all a result of sin. It won't be in heaven. The sin that makes you might think you're quite a nice person, but the sin that makes you a horrible person, unlovable person, the dishonesty, the lies, the hypocrisy, the selfishness, the envy, the anger, the cutting, critical language that comes out of your mouth every day, the bad attitude, the sin that destroys you and defaces you, that grieves you at times, it won't be in heaven. None of it. None of it will be in heaven, from the greatest, most grievous, painful sin to the smallest, tiniest, the way we describe little white lies and little insignificant sins. None of them will be in heaven. Nothing unclean will ever enter it. Think about that. There won't be so much as a smudge on the floor of heaven. I have a brother who has OCD, and the smallest speck of dust, or it's not Michael, by the way, the smallest speck of dirt or dust that lands on his floor, the little imprint of his children's fingers in the window, it drives him batty. There will not be so much as a smudge on the floor of heaven to annoy or spoil heaven for us, let alone a smudge in your character, or any defect in your character, or anyone else's character. There will be no blemishes, no stains, no imperfections of any nature. Nothing describes the perfection of heaven more completely or perfectly. Nothing unclean will ever enter it. Satan and his demons and his angels and his followers who have harassed you and will harass you every day as you hear on this world, that has troubled you and tempted you all your life, trying to do you harm and bring you down, they're going to be barred from heaven. No longer able to touch you, no longer able to whisper in your ear, causing you doubt, guilt, despair. Nothing impure will ever enter it. The terrible effects of sin in the world, we see them all around us. You don't even need to pick up a paper, put on the television, watch the news to see the terrible effects of sin. The disease, the death, the pain, the hurt, the unhappiness. They'll all be barred from heaven, never to be endured ever again. Nothing impure will ever enter it. The terrible effects of sin in you, your twisted, perverted character, the shame, the guilt, the condemnation, the constant battle that you go through. Nothing unclean will ever enter it. If you are in heaven, if you're in heaven, you'll be made perfect. All sin and all its effects finally removed, never to appear ever again. God is taking you to a place that is sin-free. Completely sin-free. A place of sinless perfection. A place from which sin and all its terrible effects are barred or locked out, never to trouble you ever again. No sin. Second thing omitted from heaven that we see here in this passage, there's no sea. No sea. Look at verse 1. John says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and all the sea was no more. Does this literally mean that there be no sea in heaven? Well, no, it doesn't. In our talk, one of our first talks in the location of heaven, we saw that the new heaven and earth, they won't be completely new, not brand spanking new. They're going to reflect, they're going to resemble the current heaven and the current earth. They're going to be new in quality, they're going to be new in character and in freshness and in feel, but in many ways they're going to be familiar, they're going to be the same. The new earth will reflect the earth as it is now. There will be mountains, there will be rivers, there will be oceans. The creatures that will be in the new heavens and new earth will reflect the creatures on earth now. There'll be sea creatures, there'll be sea and sea creatures on the new earth. We will paddle, we will snorkel, We will swim, we will dive, we will explore the sea, and we will swim with its creatures just as we do on earth right now. So what does John mean here when he says that there be no sea in heaven? Well, it's symbolic, just as much as we've seen in Revelation so far this week is symbolic, so too what John is saying here, it's symbolic. The sea, for John's readers, symbolized separation, separateness. It separated them, it cut them off from others, just as Stephen and those of you from Scotland at some stage on Saturday or next week, you'll get on the boat and you'll go to Stranraer. No, you won't, you'll go to Kinryan. And we'll be separated by the Irish Sea. Just as our friends, whenever they fly home to America on Monday, and they'll be separated by a slightly larger sea, the Atlantic. That's what the sea symbolizes in Revelation, separation. It also symbolized danger and peril. The sea was a place of storms, of strife, of shipwreck. It symbolized evil as well. It's a source of evil. In Revelation 13, John sees a beast rising out of the sea that blasphemes against God and wages war against God's people. So whenever John says here that the sea was no more, he's saying that all these things symbolized by the sea will not be in heaven. In heaven there's no separation. Nothing separating us from God, keeping us from Him. In verse 3, we're reminded that we will dwell in the very immediate presence of God. Everything in us that cuts us off from God will be removed. We'll be enabled to enjoy intimate, deep, intimate fellowship, unbroken fellowship with God, we were created to find our fulfillment, our meaning, our satisfaction and happiness in. And we will find our meaning and satisfaction and happiness in that deep, intimate relationship. There's nothing separating us from God. And that there'll be nothing separating us from each other. We will have unbroken friendship and fellowship, unity and oneness with each other. There'll be no division, no disagreements, no discord, no fallouts, no fights, no selfish ambition tempting us to try and get one over on our friends or our enemies. Just unbroken love for our God and for everyone else who's there in heaven, resulting in unbroken friendship and fellowship, complete unity and harmony. The storms, the danger, the peril symbolized by the sea will be no more. All the storms of life, the dangers, the perils, the anxieties of this life, everything that threatens to shipwreck you and bring you down, to drown you in its deluge, will be done away with for good. Those things that you're facing in your life right now, storms that are maybe building and building and building and you see approaching in the horizon. Storms that are tossing you about in their waves at this very moment today. Maybe things that you're fearful about going home to, that you will have to face next week. Things that you're just about managing to keep your head above the water today. Storms that you've maybe passed through in the not too distant past. Storms in school and in work, in your family life, in your faith. In heaven, they will be no more. Because in heaven, everything evil, symbolized by that sea, everything evil and every source of evil symbolized by the sea, will be no more. No sin, no sea. Thirdly, there will be no temple. There will be no temple. John says in verse 22, I saw no temple in the city. As he examines this heavenly city that comes out of the heavens, John cannot see a temple, and there's no church, there's no place of worship. And maybe you're thinking to yourself, Nathan, surely that cannot be right. That cannot be. This is heaven. This is the home of God's people. A place where we will worship God eternally. Surely there has to be a church. There has to be a temple, a place of worship, somewhere where we will go to worship God. Why is there no temple in heaven? Well, John says, I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb. You see, the temple in Jerusalem and the tabernacle before it, they were simply a visible symbol of God dwelling among his people. It was a place where God was said to dwell, to reside, and where he revealed himself to his people. So there's no need for such a building in heaven, because the whole of heaven is his temple, the place where he resides with his people and reveals himself to his people and is worshipped by them. To be in heaven is to be in God's home, God's church, his presence, his temple. In heaven we will not need to go to a special place to worship God, a particular place to meet with him, to be with him, to worship him. We will continually be in the immediate presence of God, in perfect, intimate fellowship with him. You'll not need to set aside special times in the day, a special time of the week to go and worship God, because as we saw yesterday, every second of every day, the whole of our lives will be consumed, will be engrossed with worshipping God. And in that sense, heaven will be one long worship service to God. And again, I've said it every day this week, and I'll probably say it again tomorrow. If that does not excite you, if that holds no interest to you, if you have no desire to worship God here on earth, if the prospect of spending eternity worshipping God sounds awful to you, what makes you think that you would like to go and be in heaven? What makes you think that you will be in heaven? If you wonder how you're going to keep this up for eternity, again, if you're worried, how am I going to enjoy endless worship of God? Will it not get boring? Remember what we thought of yesterday? There's no sin in heaven. You'll be made perfect the instant you walk through those gates. There'll be none of the coldness, none of the staleness, none of the apathy that affects our worship even at this moment. Be none of the disinterest, the boredom, the monotony, the tiredness, the apathy. None of those attitudes. There'll be no temple. The fourth thing that won't be in heaven, will be omitted from heaven, there'll be no sun. No sun or moon. Verse 23, John writes, "And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and its lamp is the Lamb." Does this mean there'll be no sun or moon in the new heavens? That they'll be dark, they'll be empty, they'll just be outer darkness and blackness? No, it doesn't. As we've already seen, the new heavens and the new earth are going to reflect the current heavens, the current atmosphere, the current sky as we see it, and the current earth. There will be sun, there will be stars, there will be a moon in the new heavens. We will gaze in rapture at sunrises and sunsets that are far more beautiful than we can even imagine, with colours more deep and bright and vibrant than we've ever seen on earth. We will stand craning our necks, looking up at the twinkling of billions upon billions, a myriad of twinkling stars. John doesn't say there'll be no sun or moon. He says there'll be no need of them. There'll be no need of them because of the glory of God and the Lamb. He's simply saying that the dazzling brilliance and the radiant glory of God and Christ will outshine the sun, the moon, and the stars, and make them redundant. In the same way, in a winter's morning, you get up, you put on your light, you go to work and you're driving your car, you put on your headlights. But as the sun rises, as the light of the sun comes into your house or lights up your drive to work, you turn your lights off, don't you? The sun makes those lights redundant. You turn them off at some stage in the winter morning. You turn your lights off on the drive to work. So too the radiance of God and Christ will make the sun and moon redundant as sources of light. That sun that dazzled you yesterday as you played on the pitches, on the inflatables down on the pitches. The sun that whenever you go on your summer holidays, you're lying on the beach, you have to put on your sunglasses. Such is the intensity and the brightness of that sun. The sun that you can't look at with the naked eye. because it makes your eyes to stream and to water, they will be as nothing. They will be as nothing compared to the brilliance and the glory and the radiance of God and Christ. It will be like comparing a tea light to the sun. Comparing the sun as it is now to the glory of Christ that we will see. Such is the majestic glory of God that we will bask in for eternity in heaven. But wonderfully, amazingly, even in the ever-present radiant glory of God, there'll be somewhere that we will be able to go to appreciate the beauty of the rising sun. And those reds, those oranges, those yellows, those wonderful different hues of pinks intermingling as the sun rises over the horizon. The rosy shades of a stunning sunset and the twinkling of millions and millions and millions of stars. No sun or moon. Fifthly, in heaven there will be no night. There will be no night. John says in verse 25, there will be no night there. Now maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, Nathan, you've just contradicted everything that you've said. In your last point, you've said there'll be moon, there'll be stars, twinkling stars. We'll sit and we'll be able to look at them. Doesn't that contradict everything that you've just said? If there's no night, how can there possibly be sunrises and sunsets? How can there be moon and stars? Well, again, John doesn't say that there's literally no night in heaven. Again, John's speaking symbolically here. Night time is a time of inactivity. It's a time when work stops. It's a time when the shops shut. When we pull our curtains, we climb into our beds. We pull up our big duvets up to our chins and sometimes over our chins. And we sleep and we rest and we do nothing. It's a time of inactivity. And John is saying here that heaven is not a place of inactivity. It's a place of that activity that we thought of yesterday, the activity of worship, the activity of work, in the service of that radiant God of glory and the Lamb. We will be active. Heaven is not a place of inactivity. And when John says that there's no night in heaven, none of that inactivity that's symbolized by night, does that mean that some people have asked already this week, does that mean that we won't sleep in heaven? There'll be no sleep for eternity? Will we always be on the go, always active, worshipping, working, serving? After all, won't our bodies be perfect? Surely we will not need to sleep anymore. Well, we're not told. But just because we will be perfect, just because we have perfect bodies, does not mean that we won't enjoy sleep. Sleep was part of God's perfect world, after all, whenever He made Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were perfect and the world was perfect, and they slept, did they not? And if we're going to eat, we're going to drink in heaven, as we have reason to believe from the Scriptures, why won't we also sleep? Why won't we refuel and rest our bodies in sleep? As well as inactivity, that's something for you to think about later on. But as well as inactivity, night was also a time of danger. It was a time of peril. It was a time that whenever the gates of the cities were closed to keep out enemies, to keep the people safe and secure in their beds while they slept, it was a time whenever people who were up to no good were out and about and doing badness and harm and sin. Just the same way that John and Kerry and the camp committee, whenever they hear the pitter-patter of tiny feet in the middle of the night, they know that somebody is up to no good. There's badness going on somewhere. And that's again what nighttime was symbolic of and symbolized here. And John is saying, when he's saying that there's no night in heaven, he's saying that heaven is a place where a place of complete sinlessness and a place of total security. The sinful things that people get up to under cover of darkness, the dangers and fears associated with the nighttime and with darkness, will be completely banished, exiled from heaven. We'll enjoy the glory and the beauty of the night and the night sky without any fear of any of those nighttime terrors. There'll be no night. Sixthly, there will be no shut gates. No shut gates. In verse 25, John says, its gates will never be shut by day. Every night, after you have been sent to bed, gone to bed, hopefully have climbed into bed, a committee member, John or Kerry or one of the committee members, walks around all the doors and they lock them. They go to the gates, they pull them shut and they lock them to keep you safe, to keep bad people who might steal your cars, people who might break in and do harm, to keep them out. The city gates that John is referring to here, city gates were only closed during the day whenever the city was under attack. They were thrown open the first thing in the morning and closed last thing at night. The only time they were closed during the day was whenever the city was under threat and under attack. So by saying that the gates of heaven will never be shut during the day, John is re-emphasizing the total security of heaven. There's a complete absence of danger, of threat, of fear, of apprehension, of worry or anxiety in heaven. There is nothing there that could possibly harm you or hurt you or cause you even a second of anxiety or worry. There's no need for any soldiers, no need for any policemen, any firemen, any security guards to keep you safe in heaven, because there is nothing there that could possibly threaten your security, your health or your happiness. No need for any counsellors to unburden your worries and your anxieties. No school counsellors to go and unburden your anxieties about school. No workplace counsellors to go and unburden your anxieties about your workplace pressures. No marriage counsellors, no counsellors of any description, because there'll be no worry, there'll be no anxiety. Nothing possible that will cause you any fear, worry or anxiety. And there's nothing that can threaten that security of heaven. There isn't one enemy of God that will remain to threaten the security of heaven. All God's enemies having been securely banished to that lake of fire that John describes in verse 8. There'll be no shut gates. Next in heaven, John says, there's no death. There's no death. In verse 4, he says, death shall be no more. Death shall be no more. You see, with sin excluded from heaven, all the terrible consequences of sin, everything that results from sin is also excluded from heaven. If you're a dog lover and you have a dog at home, you keep your dog, well, many of you will keep your dog outside. And in keeping your dog outside, you'll not only exclude the dog from your home, but you will exclude some of the not so nice consequences of having the dog in your home. There's no poo on your carpet, no fur balls or food thrown up on your carpet. There's no dog hair on your carpet. There's no dog smell throughout your house. If you exclude the dog, you exclude all those nasty consequences of having the dog in your house. I can see some of you don't have dogs, think, why would you ever have a dog in your house if those are some of the consequences? And that's what John is saying here. Sin having been excluded from heaven, it's not only sin that's excluded from heaven, but all the nasty, terrible consequences of sin are also excluded as well. And the worst, the nastiest, the most horrible, devastating consequence of sin is death. The punishment that God warned Adam and Eve that he would bring upon them in Genesis chapter 2 if they sinned. The punishment that he carried out in faithfulness to that warning in Genesis chapter 3. Physical death that separates our souls from our bodies. Spiritual death that separates us from God and results in eternal spiritual death and separation from Him in hell whenever we die. No other consequence of sin is more dreadful or terrifying or awful, or has brought more heartache or grief or anguish or pain or tears. And John tells us it's excluded from heaven. There's no spiritual death in heaven. Again, John is emphasizing again and again, there's no separation. No separation from God, nothing cutting us off from God, spoiling our relationship with Him. The sin that cuts us off from Him is taken away, and it's dealt with. That sea of separation is no more. And there's no physical death in heaven. The thing that has caused such devastation and heartache and anguish and loneliness and tears here on earth will be completely omitted and excluded from heaven. No one will stop breathing in heaven. No one's heart will stop pumping. No one's pulse will stop beating. No one will be taken from us by death in heaven. There's no hospitals, no hospices where we go to watch our loved ones pass away. There'll be no mortuaries, no morgues, no funeral homes where our bodies will be laid out in preparation to be placed in the grave. No cemeteries, no crematoria where our bodies are laid to rest. No funeral services where we'll stand heartbroken at the graves of our loved ones and our friends as we watch their bodies lowered into the ground with our tears dripping off our chin. None of those painful anniversaries, those dates where again our heart is annually broken as we remember those loved ones that have gone before us. There's no death. No death in heaven. Just life. Perpetual, everlasting, eternal life in the presence of God and in relationship with Him. There are very few things here in life that are inevitable. One thing, the only thing, really, in many respects, that is inevitable is death. And we face that inevitability every day. We face the fear of death. We face the sorrow of death. That heart-wrenching sadness and sorrow of death. There'll be none of that in heaven. No death. Eighthly, there will be no pain. No pain. In verse 4, John writes, neither shall there be pain anymore. Again, every last drop of pain that there is in this world is down to sin. So with sin being excluded from heaven, so is all pain. There's no physical pain, not 1 ounce of physical pain in heaven. No bodies racked with the agonizing pain of terminal illness. Maybe you've seen a loved one whose body has been racked with that pain of some terminal illness. No muscle pain, no joint pain, Ruth, no arthritis, none, all gone. No stomach pain, not even so much, think about it, not even so much as a sore head. No stubbed toes as you step out of the shower, no splinters in your finger. Heaven is completely pain-free. There's no emotional pain. At times the emotional pain is harder to deal with than the physical pain, is it not? No emotional pain. No sorrow, no heartache of any description, no depression, no feeling down. Do you battle with that? Do you battle with the darkness of depression and sadness, heaviness come upon you? None of that in heaven. No hurt feelings, no feeling offended, no pain of loneliness. None of that. No pain of rejection or disappointment, being left out. No pain of failure. No pain of letting others down. You ever feel that pain? You've let your family, your friends down, and it's hurt you, it's grieved you. None of that in heaven. No pain of falling short of people's expectations for you, or people falling short of yours. Heaven is completely pain-free. Completely pain-free. And again, we're so used to pain, aren't we? We take it for granted. We deal with it. We face it every day in this world. We live with it. We experience it continually. We cannot fully appreciate what it's going to be like in heaven. This painless, physical, emotional, pain-free environment. How wonderful it is going to be to live in a sin-free, pain-free world. Lastly, along with no death and no pain, none of these consequences of sin, there will be no tears. There will be no tears. Verse 4, He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. God will wipe away all tears. No tears of sorrow and sadness in heaven. With the expulsion of sin from heaven, there will be nothing there to make you cry. Nothing that would possibly make you sad, to sorrow, to grieve, to mourn, or to cry. Think of all those things that have made you cry thus far in your life. Physical pain. Time you were hurt, you fell, you stubbed your toe, you grazed your knee, you broke your arm, and you cried. Emotional pain. We're just thinking about your feelings hurt. You were let down, you were disappointed, you felt lonely, you felt empty, you felt depressed or distressed, and you cried. Death. You experienced the loss of a loved one, a grandparent, a parent, or a friend. Someone you dearly loved, and you cried. Someone hurt you. There's some failure that you were responsible for, a hurt you caused, a damage that you caused. You let someone down and it hurt you, and you cried. Your sin. Seeing it as God sees it, seeing its ugliness and the offence it is to God, the damage that it caused, the hurt it caused to others, and you cried over it. All those things, anything that has ever caused you to shed tears of sorrow and sadness and anguish and disappointment and regret, will be excluded from heaven. Can you imagine a world without tears? Those tears of sadness, a world where everyone is happy, where everyone is continually happy, where you awake in the morning and you're happy, you go to bed at night and you're happy, and you've been happy every second of the day in between, and no one ever feels even the tiniest tinge of sadness. That's heaven. A place of unimaginable, unending joy. No sin, no sea, no temple, no sun or moon, no night, no shut gates, no death, no pain, no tears. What an unimaginably wonderful place. What an unimaginably wonderful place. And I say it again, I cannot wait. I cannot wait. I can't wait to be there. That's what my loved ones who trusted in Christ are experiencing right now. That's what your loved ones who died trusting Christ are experiencing right now. That is what God is offering you. That's what He is holding out to you with open hands. That's what you'll miss out on. That's what you will forego if you don't trust Christ. That's why it's worth persevering and enduring and keeping on going. That's why it's worth all the effort, the sweat, the blood, the laughter, the ridicule, the pain, and the tears. I only have one question, and on this I'm going to end. Will your name be number 10 on that list? Will you be number 10 on that list? No Stephen, no David, no Mary, no Esther, no Susan in heaven. Will your name be added to the list of things that are omitted from heaven? will your name be added to the list that we read off in verse 8 in this chapter? The list of those who are locked out from heaven and who spend eternity in a lake that burns with fire and sulphur, that lake of hell. A place where all those things that are omitted from heaven will be present in all their dreadfulness and horror and misery and terror and anguish. Sin and all its terrible consequences, separation, tears, pain, death, all present in all their terrible fullness. Will your name be added to that list? For those of you who are believers, is there somebody in your family? Is there a friend in school whose name might be on that list? Because you did not tell them about heaven. You did not tell them about your Saviour. You did not tell them about Christ and how they could escape from hell and enjoy this wonderful place. Amen.